Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to the Celtic Way. I am your host, John McGinley. I'm joined by Ryan McGinley, and we're here to chat through the latest Celtic news and developments. There's plenty to talk about still. We've done a bit of aftermath on the channel already. We've got a few videos up and out. We had a live reaction. I know Ryan did a video with Josh yesterday, and I did a video with Hamish later on. So we've run the full gamut of what to say about Celtic's Champions League exit. And we're not going to be talking about that much today because, as I say, we've got 3 videos out there. We'll just be saying the same stuff today. None of us are happy with Celtic going out of the Champions League and the manner that they did, the lack of preparedness, all of that. Ryan, I'm going to stop myself because I will get into a rant here. How are you doing this morning?
I'm better than I was this time yesterday, to be honest with you. A couple of things probably added to that positivity, to be honest with you. Don't want to go too much into that because Celtic, they obviously didn't do their job. Other teams didn't do their job either. But I'm better than I was yesterday. I think the result is kind of settled in my head now. Now Celtic are going to apply their trade in the Europa League. I think the good thing about this job is that, despite talking about Celtic 24/7, you do tend to move on with writing. Nothing stops at Celtic. Everything moves on to the next game. There's always a new focus, and I guess that's my sort of view on things at the moment. So I've gotten over the result of Kairat. Still disappointed, of course, but we move on to the next fixture.
Yeah, I think we're all aware, the scars of that one run deep a little bit, and the outcry of that will rumble on for a wee while. There's plenty, as you say, everything moves on. Celtic are in the Europa League draw tomorrow. Tomorrow lunchtime, 12 p.m, Celtic are in the Europa League draw. Celtic then play Rangers on Sunday. This is it all rumbles on. It all rumbles on. Any kind of transfer news yesterday, Ryan, that you want to touch on first? We know that Balikwisha's passed the medical. We're expecting his announcement imminently. Sirache's also incoming at Celtic. Those seem to be the 2 main incomings at the moment, and then we have to wait and see how the last few days of the window develop.
Yeah, those seem to be the 2 imminent ones. Now, I would hope that Balikwisha would be announced today, just as a sort of feel-good factor, bring a little bit of feel-good factor back. Even though it's a late signing, maybe one that should have been made ahead of the Champions League qualifiers, I think there'll still be a relative happiness seeing him come to the club after over a year of being linked with the player. It's not quite as long as how long Kvistgarden was linked to the club, but it was still a good amount of time. And yeah, I'll be happy to see him come through the doors at both Celtic Park and Lennoxtown, because I've been writing about him for a year. I've been writing about this player in 3 different transfer windows. It's nice to have an end point as well as a start point, and it looks as if, well, I think the most positive thing was that it seems by all accounts that he passed his medical yesterday, and I think that was the worry for a lot of people. And there was news came out last week that Celtic were a little bit worried about whether or not he could pass a medical too. So the fact that he's got through that with no hitches seemingly is good news. I was also bringing up there, because I didn't want to butcher his second name. There was a link yesterday. Celtic reported target Sebastian Tunetke, a Tunisian international that was born in Norway. Norway's his birthplace, but I think his dad is from Tunisia. Celtic lodged a bid, let me see, of 3 million euros, but Hammarby want double that. To
that was coming from Swedish media, Ryan. That was coming from the Swedish media side as well.
Expressen, Swedish media Expressen was reporting that. So Celtic will have to up their bid if they are wanting this player, if that link is to be believed. But it seems that Celtic are definitely shopping for more wingers, apart from Balikwisha coming through the door.
Yeah, and that's what that's what Celtic need, of course. I mean, the glaring holes in Celtic's squad are there for all to see. It's another thing we've been talking about for weeks and months, and unfortunately this is where Celtic are at. I'm seeing a lot of people in the chat, they're still feeling sore about Tuesday night, and I totally understand that, everyone. Like, we're not here to gloss over that at all, but we're here to present Celtic's reality, which is the Europa League, and Celtic are in this competition now, and as I say, they're going into the draw tomorrow. So we're going to present a bit of information about what the Europa League entails this year and all that kind of thing. I think so 25 of the 36 teams have qualified for the Europa League already after last night's results. This is the full list of that as it stands. Now, you can see Celtic are in pot 2, but as you may be aware, the pots don't particularly matter because Celtic will draw 2 teams from each pot. They will draw 8 teams in total. They will play 8 matches in total. 4 of them will be at home and 4 of them will be away. The league phase for the Europa League mirrors the league phase for the Champions League last year, so it's the exact same setup in that regard. But this is some of the quality of team that Celtic can face. Now, Rangers are obviously included on this list. Celtic cannot draw Rangers at this stage of the competition. So, and the same applies for Aberdeen should they make it through this evening. So Celtic can't play Rangers or Aberdeen. So keep that in mind. But yeah, your pot 1 teams, it's looking like Roma, Porto, Feyenoord, etc. Good standard of team here, Ryan. It's tough. If you get the wrong draw here, it's looking like a pretty tough set of fixtures.
Yeah, there's plenty of household names in there. Maybe not of the same strength as what they were previously, but there's still good teams in there. Teams that Celtic have faced in the recent past as well, the likes of Feyenoord, Dinamo Zagreb, Real Betis. We'll go on to talk about Celtic's last Europa League campaign, but they're in there, and they're a good side. They've obviously got Isco. They got to the Conference League final where they lost against Chelsea. Go Ahead Eagles. Celtic were linked with Jacob Broom. It seems as if that link is over, so there could be not a reunion, but a meeting of the two sides between Broom and Celtic, though maybe not in the way that they would have expected. But yeah, I think Nottingham Forest are in there as well. They're back in European football, a historic side. I think if there was one tie that I would want Celtic to play, especially away from home, it'd be a trip to Nottingham Forest. I think that'd be an incredible historic game. But there's loads of good teams and teams that Celtic should be able to compete with as well. I guess that's one positive. A lot of these teams, if Celtic can strengthen the final days in some key areas, then I think they can compete against some of these sides.
I don't want to rain on anyone's cereal, but after what we witnessed the other night, my personal opinion is I don't have much confidence about this with the state of the Celtic squad as it stands. I have to say, I'm looking at this list of teams and I'm thinking, if Celtic played any of these teams at the weekend or next week, would I fancy them? And my answer to that right now, unfortunately, is no. Celtic need to get their act together on the pitch and off the pitch, as far as I am concerned. So as you know, there's 11 more teams to qualify. Of the teams that hold a substantial first leg league that look like they will be joining, it's teams like Malmo, who hold a 3-0 lead over Sigma. You have Genk, who hold a 5-1 lead over Lech Poznan. You've got Braga, who hold a 4-0 lead over over Lincoln Red Imps. You've got Midtjylland, who hold a 4-0 lead over Kups of Finland. So those kind of teams look like making the draw as well. So yeah, as I say, 12 o'clock tomorrow, everyone. Celtic will find out their fate. And again, as I said, the league phase mirrors the Champions League, so if you finish 1st to 8th, you go straight through to the last 16. If you finish 9th to 16th, you're seeded for the knockout playoff round. If you finish 17th to 24th, you qualify as an unseeded team for that knockout playoff round. So exactly the same as the Champions League. This is how the dates run across the league phase, so again, very similar to kind of the kind of schedule that we saw last year, except that most of the matches are on a Thursday night. It runs from September through to the end of January, so football goes on after winter, and European football goes on after Christmas, should I say. So yeah, again, it's going to be a really busy set of fixtures for Celtic. We saw last year that kind of, we know Brendan Rodgers talked about this kind of the intensity of the fixtures and the squad needed for that. Celtic need a deep squad to get through all these games alongside the bog standard league matches. Ryan, one of the downsides of the Europa League for me is Thursday, Sunday football. I'm just not a fan of it as a concept, and it just takes a little bit of excitement out of the season for me. So I guess that's something we have to deal with for the first time in 4 years. Yeah,
that's the biggest downside for me, because it totally messes up the fixtures as well, because every Saturday game after a European game will be moved to a Sunday. So that's coming. That those fixtures are going to get changed, which is a little bit disappointing. But it's the schedule that Celtic have got to work with, and unfortunately that's a minor punishment to what happened on Tuesday night, because they couldn't get past Kairat. They now have to play Thursday night football into Sunday afternoon football. So that's a disappointment, but it's what happens when you don't qualify for the Champions League. That the next step is the Europa League, and that they play that competition gets played on a Thursday night, and that is unfortunately a consequence of their actions on the pitch on Tuesday.
Yeah, unfortunately so. So if you're wondering about the money that is available in the league in the Europa League, again, I'm not putting this forward as any kind of bonus for Celtic. I'm just the information is there for you to take as you will. The participation money is looking about £12.6 million before a ball is kicked. That doesn't take into account prize money, further prize money, or attendance money, ticket money, etc. like that. UEFA's money split into these three tranches now, where there's like a share of a general equal share across the competition of every team who qualifies for the league phase, which is about £3 million. Then there's this value pillar, which is made up of TV money, the TV deal, and kind of your coefficient. And I think we're expecting that to be about just over £5 million as far as Celtic are concerned. And then Celtic receive a kind of parachute payment from the Champions League playoff round of £3.7 million. So it all adds up to about £12.6 million. That participation fee is about half of what you would get if you were in the Champions League, and then the performance bonuses in the Champions League are much more than what you get in the Europa League. So in the Europa League you get about £400,000 per win, about £130,000 per draw, you get £65,000 per position gained, and then there's various bonuses based on where you finish from that point on. And then there are further payments in the knockout rounds, etc. But as I say, it's well below the Champions League. I think UEFA in totality bring in about £3.3 billion in total, and I think 75% of that goes to the Champions League, and then I think about 17% of it goes to the Europa League, and then about 8% of it goes to the Conference League. So massive drop-offs here, and again, people won't care about this too much because I think people are seeing all the money coming into Celtic not being used in a particularly efficient way, so it's not going into our pockets, you know what I mean? But this is the kind of money that Celtic will be bringing in from the Europa League this year, Ryan.
Yeah, and it very much feels like what you were saying about where the money goes in terms of the Champions League and the Europa League, it feels like the undercard to the main event, which is the Champions League. That's why we were so disappointed the other night, is because the main event is the Champions League, and Celtic have plied their trade there over the past 3 years, as we were speaking about before we came on. It's been 4 years since Celtic played in the Europa League. So there's that disappointment that they're dropping down after being kind of used to playing in the Champions League. I know their qualification record is very, very sketchy, but the fact that they got that automatic qualification, and in a way you were kind of used to playing in the Champions League. If you won the league, then you go into the Champions League, and you knew that was coming at the end of September into January. Unfortunately, that won't be the case, and you can see that with the financials as well. The Champions League's the main event, but like what Brendan Rodgers said, and I want to try and remain as positive as I can. Celtic
you don't need
still
to,
have
Ryan.
I know.
You don't need to remain as positive. Like the reality is that Celtic have made a mess of this. They've made a complete mess of this, and they're in a really poor position because of it. And I think that it deserves to be called out as it is.
Yeah, I just feel like I have been doing that for the past 3 days. I am naturally, or I try to be, the most positive person as possible. But even just now, it's difficult to polish the Europa League as if it's something that it's not. It's not the Champions League. It's still Europe, but it's not the Europe that you and I would want. Unfortunately, I just wanted to see progress in Europe, and that didn't happen this season. So a little bit disappointed still, but I'm trying to get it out of my mind as much as I can. Though that is becoming a little bit difficult.
Yeah, it's one of those things where, listen, you can't really shy away from the reality. Celtic are in Europa League, so it needs to be, it needs to be spoken about, because this is where Celtic are. But I'm not happy about having to
certainly
do
not,
Celtic in the Europa League show,
Yeah, they're certainly not holding back in the comments. We can see the comments as they come in live. Nobody's really holding back when it comes to the Europa League. Some choice words getting used that I will not repeat at 10 o'clock in the morning, that's for sure.
Yeah. Okay, so everyone, as you know, Celtic were last in the Europa League 4 years ago, and during the Ange Postecoglou reign. That was the result of another poor performance in Champions League qualifying, one of 7 of the last 9 Champions League qualifying campaigns that have gone awry for Celtic. Celtic went out to Michelin that year. They then had to go into the Europa League qualifying, and they overcame Jablonec and AZ Alkmaar. Then they went into this group stage with Bayer Leverkusen, Real Betis and Ferencváros. That's when it was still a 4-team group stage. Celtic finished third and parachuted into the Europa Conference League. And then we had the unfortunate incident against Bodo Glimt, which we don't like to talk about too much because that was another poor and dark night on Celtic's European history. The important thing to note about that, the 2021 and 2022 campaign compared to this one, is there is no parachute into the Conference League. Celtic will only play in the Europa League for the remainder of this season. They will either finish in the top 24 or they will be out of Europe altogether. There is no parachute anywhere. So Celtic have to finish into the top 24 of the Europa League phase to progress in Europe past that. So yeah, no parachute. It's all in the Europa League, Ryan. And listen, do you think finishing in this top 24 is achievable? You were talking there earlier about, some of these teams you might want Celtic to be competitive against. I can't have confidence at the moment, but realistically, if you look at the big picture and you look at Celtic historically, you would think, and even going back to last year, you would have to say finishing in that top 24 has to be the aim,
It's the aim and it's the bare minimum from this competition, in my opinion. I'm gonna get bold. I think Celtic need to finish in the top 24. I think now the objective for Celtic is to go. I know. I'm not going to say they're going to go and win the thing because there's far better teams than Celtic in this competition. But I would quite like Celtic to win a knockout tie. That's something that I've never seen before in my time supporting and following and writing about Celtic. I'd like to see Celtic win a knockout tie at some stage in my adult life, or my life in general. I know it was 2004, I think it was, 2003, 2004, the last time. I wasn't really into football as much then, so I've never seen it before with my own two eyes. So that's what I want to see. I want to see Celtic win a knockout tie in Europe. I want to see at least some form of European progression by way of a knockout tie being in Celtic's favour. That's what I want to see, but top 24 has got to be the aim. If you can get in the top 8, then great, but I think that's pie in the sky stuff just now. But top 24, guarantee a playoff game, and let's see where we go from there.
Yeah, I would agree with that. As I say, I'm pretty downbeat on Celtic at the moment and Celtic's quality. And listen, things turn around quickly, a few signings in the door, got Rangers on Sunday, you pick up a positive result there. The mood does start to turn, but I can't help just thinking back and thinking, that was Tuesday night was a real hinge point in the season for me. And I said it was going to be a season defining game, and it would be disingenuous of me to come back on here 2 days later and say, oh, Celtic have to move on. Celtic have badly messed up here, and I mean, it's going to be a struggle to get over it all. But hopefully Celtic can start to pick up performances, start to pick up wins. A good run in the Europa will start to excite an element, I think, of the sport, sections of the sport. But it's not going to come until Celtic prove themselves and win a knockout tie of note. Because as you say, the record goes back embarrassingly long, as far as I'm concerned, and Celtic need to fix that in short order. We'll bring in some comments here. Let us know what you're thinking of the Europa League. If you have any questions about the Europa League, you can let us know. And Big Dom coming in straight away saying this Europa competition is an unwanted distraction. And I think some people will feel like that, in the sense of, like, it's not the Champions League, it's not the prestige of Europe. Does it matter that much? Should Celtic have to get their house in order domestically first? I get all those arguments. For me, I want Celtic to achieve in every competition that they play in. Henrik McLashton was asking, looking ahead, is it possible to move down the Conference League? No, that is not. That is not possible. William O'Toole saying, the best way I can put my feelings about our upcoming Euro campaign, look at the absolute state of the Ibrox club. Are you sure we will beat them? What does that say about our chances in Europe? I think that's fairly accurate. I mean, we all saw what happened with Rangers last night. Am I particularly confident about going into this derby on Sunday? Can't say that I am, Ryan. I'm not hugely... I don't think it's a guaranteed win for Celtic on Sunday at all.
No, but I don't think anybody's confident going into this derby on Sunday. It's a wild, wild situation. I can't remember a derby like this where there's just no confidence whatsoever in either team, and we don't even know what's going to happen on Sunday with regards to the way the game is going to go. Despite Rangers' result last night, you still look at Celtic and you're thinking, where are the goals going to come from for Celtic at the weekend? Who's going to be the man to step up? Are they even at the club yet? That's the question. Is the hero of that game even arrived at the club? Has even signed for the club yet? So yeah, it's there's positives and negatives because you're going straight into a big game, and I know that can be a negative because there's a lot of pressure, but there's also an opportunity for Celtic not to change the narrative, but to up the feel-good factor a little bit. You know, and a Glasgow derby win could certainly help that case. A record at Ibrox recently has not been the greatest, and if they could get a win against a struggling Rangers side, then I think the mood music would be a lot better. But yes, there's still that disappointment firmly in the air because of the European disaster that happened on Tuesday. But all focus has got to be on that game. You know, that's the next game is the most important. It's such a cliche, but it's true. There needs to be focus on that. It's the last game before the international break. Chance to continue their not their unbeaten run, but their invincible run in the league so far with 3 points. And if they can do that, then the table will look very, very good. But yeah, that disappointment still remains. But I want to see Celtic push on now.
The coolest sibling coming. The season's not over. Get over yourself. The most entitled thing I've ever heard. We only qualify when it's automatic. We are not a Champions League club. Objectively, Celtic are not a Champions League club at the moment. I do not think it is entitled to expect Celtic to qualify for the Champions League as a seeded side in the playoff process when we were a hair's breadth away of taking Bayern Munich to extra time in a knockout tie last season. And Celtic competed well in the league phase last season. It's not entitled to then expect Celtic to beat a team of the strength of Kaira Almaty. So I agree with you in the sense that Celtic are not a Champions League club. I don't think it's entitled to have expected Celtic to have made the Champions League this week. That's my 2 cents on that. The season, of course, is not over, but I think the Champions League supercharged Celtic season last year. I think it had the potential to do that again. And I think Celtic's season now will suffer as a result of not being in the Champions League. So that's my take on that comment, Ryan. Do you think it's entitled to expect Celtic to be in the Champions League? Is that entitled, or is that just just recognising what the ambition of Celtic should be?
I really dislike the term entitled, and there are some moments where you can use it, but I think it's just a winning mentality and a want for Celtic to play in the top level of European football. Are we expectant that Celtic are playing in the Champions League? Well, we have been for the past 3 years because they've automatically qualified. You would hope that due to their experience of playing in the group stages or the league phase as it was last season, that they would be ready to even play through a qualifier and get to that stage once again. So Celtic have been a Champions League team because they've been playing there. Unfortunately, because of their result on Tuesday, FC Kaira are a Champions League team because they are featured in the group stage, and Celtic right now are the Europa League team, simply down to the fact that that's the competition that they're playing in. I don't necessarily agree with Colin. We're not a Champions League team. We're not this. We're not that. You are if you're playing in it. You know, if you're in that competition, then you are a participant of it. Therefore, you are a Champions League team. So at the moment, Celtic are a Europa League team because that's the competition that they qualified for, unfortunately.
Comment here, a lot of greeting faces. We're in the Europa League. I'm looking forward to it. And look, I think there are Celtic fans looking forward to the Europa League. I think there's certainly some who think that Celtic can be competitive. I know there's been a prevailing thought in recent years, especially, before last season. Last season, Celtic did well in the league phase, but before last season, there was a fair amount of chat that, would Celtic be better suited to be in a Europa League team? Would we have a better chance of winning this fabled knockout tie that, as you say, we've not won for 20-odd years? I think there's an element of truth to that. I think my issue is that even when Celtic have been in the Europa League over the last decade plus, they still haven't been winning these knockout ties. So I would at least rather try to achieve at a higher level than fail at a lower level. And unfortunately, Celtic have failed too often, whether it's been the Europa League or even against Bodo Glimt in the Conference League. That's still been a big barrier for Celtic. So I get it. I know some people are looking forward to the Europa League. I guess that's why we're doing the video today and kind of letting people know what the lay of the land is.
Yeah, and it's the situation that Celtic find themselves in, so it's only right that we talk about it, because these are the teams, that list, that group of teams, or the pots of teams that you brought up, they're all teams that Celtic could face, apart from a couple obviously being from Scotland. Those are all the teams that Celtic can face in the Europa League, so it is important that we talk about that and discuss that, because that's the situation that Celtic find themselves in at the moment, and that's what they've got to work with from now until January at least. So let's see what happens, I guess, when it comes to the competition. I want Celtic to win every game that they play when they enter into Europa League, but ideally it's not really where we want the club to be. We want it to be in the Champions League because that's the main event.
Yeah, CJ7 actually, I think this comment perhaps accurately sums up my feelings on this entire situation better than than anyone else in the chat I've seen today. I will just take this one game at a time. If Celtic up their game, then I might look forward to it in terms of the Europa League, but at the minute I'm totally flat. I'm the same. I can't get up for the Europa League at the moment just because I need to see Celtic prove themselves at that level and see if Celtic are up for it in the Europa League and see if the fans are up to it in general. It's going to be interesting to see what sales of the Europa League package are like. It's going to be interesting to see what attendances are like there. And then if the players take it as seriously as they take the Champions League last year, we do know that to raise your game at a Champions League is a different thing to raising your game at a Europa League standard. So if Celtic are up for the Europa League this year, and Brendan Rodgers is up for it, and Celtic are looking to achieve in this competition, then it could end up being quite exciting. But as CJ7 here, it's probably best at the moment to take things one game at a time, and that'll start on Sunday against Rangers.
Certainly, yeah. I think the one, and I'm going to bring a positive in, or try to bring a positive in, to maybe not at the moment 50-50 towards some teams that Celtic could play, but if they get business in before the end of the window, there will be some areas of shortage, but Celtic by and large will have a team that should be able to compete against some of the sides in the Europa League. A lot of these games will be 50-50, end-to-end stuff, and I think that could suit Celtic. Hitting on the counter, a lot more even games rather than Celtic sitting back for 70, 75 minutes and hoping to hit on the counter-attack. Those 50-50 games, those game situations could help Celtic in the long run if they're going right up against teams. And there's teams that Celtic have played before in the recent past. I mentioned Dinamo Zagreb, I mentioned Real Betis, I know that was a few years ago. You get Ferencvaros as well. Loads of teams. It's a bit of a who's who of who Celtic have played in the last 5 years, but I think these games can be even, and Celtic can definitely emerge victorious in some of them. So as much as I'm disappointed, there are, maybe not at the moment, but by the time they come around and by the time we see who Celtic face in the draw, or who they get in the draw, then there might be some excitement about the games. But right now I can understand why so many people are downbeat on the Europa League, particularly because that result on Tuesday is still so raw and fresh in their minds.
Hazel Finn saying, I think the Europa League will tell us a lot by the end of the season. Let's give it a go. More players needed, though. That's undoubted. I mean, again, the transfer deadline's coming up, but the state of the squad as it stands would worry me in the Europa League. The state of Celtic's wingers would worry me in the Europa League. So Celtic need to sort this, and we need to hope that Balak Wisha is a home run signing. And do any of us know that he's going to be? I know we know that he's achieved to an extent in Belgium. We know that he's got issues, an injury record. He has had injuries in his past. I mean, I like the look of Balak Wisha, but at the same time, just given the state of everything at the moment, it's another wait and see situation. Celtic need that player to be an absolute home run, and I guess we have to wait and see if he is that, Ryan. That's unfortunately the pressure now on Balak Wisha's shoulders, also coming into the club, because the club have manufactured this situation where we really need him to hit the ground running from the start.
Yeah, he needs to hit the ground running anyway, because there's nobody else in the team, especially in the wide positions at the moment, that's really catching the eye or making a name for themselves. There's also the pressure because he's been linked with the club for a year and people know his name. They know his name because he's been linked for the past 3 transfer windows. There's an expectancy for him to come in and eventually do well because Celtic have been linked with him for so long. So there is pressure on him, but I'm hoping that the quality can shine through very early doors and that he can show that he is a Celtic player. It's clear that he's been, the comments, I think there was comments that came out on the Celtic Way from about March or April, where he was absolutely gutted that the move to Celtic didn't happen because of his injury last season. I know that Celtic it was reported that they were quite close to signing him. Then he suffered that injury at the start of August, and that move was scuppered for the winger. But he's finally getting what he wants. Hopefully he's announced sooner rather than later. I'm actually speaking to someone later on today who'll be able to tell me a little bit more about Balak-Wisha. So hopefully the reports are good on him and he can be a star for Celtic on the wing or in midfield, depending on where he plays, because he seems to be very versatile this season in a number of positions.
Yeah, so we're expecting Balak-Wisha to be announced at some point today or tomorrow. Sriracha as well, a Uruguayan international fullback who looks to be Kieran Tierney's backup. In that regard, there's some chat about Inamura will then head off on loan. Ryan, I think that was the chat yesterday that Celtic are offering him on this service. I think it's called Transfer Room, isn't it? Where all the clubs have access to this thing called Transfer Room, where you put notices up for players who are available, etc. The reports yesterday were that Inamura is now being shopped around for a potential loan somewhere, so it looks like he won't be staying at the club, especially if Sriracha joins.
Yeah, and I think it's a little bit disappointing, but it's expected at the same time. I thought he did okay against Livingston, but Brendan Rodgers really did caveat his performance by saying he'll succeed when Celtic have got 70, 75, 80% of the ball and no real defensive responsibilities on the day. For him, I think game time is the most important thing, and upping his physicality as well. He does look a little bit lightweight at times on the ball or off the ball. So I think if he can get some game time in a good league in Europe ahead of potentially coming back to the club next season and seeing his development, then I would have no problems with this whatsoever. Happy he's made his debut. Happy he's had that in with Celtic as well. He's actually made his competitive debut. It's not as if we've not seen him. But now is the time for him to go out and see if you can get a good loan for him. It would seem that would be the case. That was kind of hinted at by Rodgers with him not being in his Champions League squad. Or it wasn't even hinted. He said he'd probably go out on loan. So yeah, we'll see where he goes. We'll see where he ends up. But hopefully he gets a good move and that both parties can get the best out of him. Both Celtic for the game time that will get at another club and on the pitch for the team that he joins.
Yeah, so various ins and outs, I guess, over the next couple of days. As I say, we've got the draw live tomorrow at 12 p.m. We will have a live reaction to the draw afterwards on here. So tomorrow's morning briefing will be delayed. It'll be the same as when we had the previous draw. There's no point doing a morning briefing and then the draw happens and everything's out of date 2 hours later. So we will be doing our tomorrow's live show after the Europa League draw. We will hear from Brendan Rodgers tomorrow as well. And again, Hamish made the point on our kind of weekly show. He's kind of fed up of hearing from Rodgers, not because he doesn't like Rodgers or doesn't like what he has to say, just because Rodgers is just saying the same thing in every press conference at the moment. And I'm just wondering whether that's going to continue, Ryan, or we might actually get to the heart of Rodgers' true feelings on this situation at Celtic. Again, I don't think anyone's expecting him to throw Michael Nicholson and the rest of the Celtic board under the bus, but I wonder if we'll hear anything a bit more from Rodgers on the situation as it's played out.
Yeah, it just feels as if he's the spokesperson for the club at the moment, because he's the only person that's actually coming out and sitting in front of the media and giving updates as to what's happening both on and off the pitch. So I can understand why that tiredness and the fact that he's saying the same things, but he's asked the same things, and you know what, these people are well within the right to ask the same things because they are the pressing issues. Nothing's changed. Celtic still need players ahead of the end of the transfer window. Where are the players? But yeah, I can see why people are getting a little bit fed up with what Rodgers has to say, because the answers aren't changing. And I don't even think that's necessarily Rodgers' fault. It's just that there's no movement or a lack of movement happening behind the scenes, unfortunately. I feel like I've said unfortunately a lot in this briefing today. It just feels like that sort of briefing where we're talking about a lot of negatives, but it's understandable because that's the situation that Celtic are in at the moment. They've got a few days left to go until the end of the transfer window. Hopefully they can get 3 or 4 players through the door, the two that we know of, plus another 1 or 2 potentially, and really change the mood about the place, as well as a good result at the weekend against Rangers. That's got to be the aim. Those are the 2 main aims before the international break for me, and I hope that they can complete both, successfully.
Kaiser asking, has the Celtic way tried approaching the club board for interviews? Unfortunately, we don't have a press relationship with Celtic, and that's just the lay of the land. We have tried, but no, we don't have that relationship with Celtic, unfortunately. So take that as you will. Someone asking what time the draw is tomorrow and what channels it's on. The draw is Raymond Haddon here asking that. What time is the draw and which channels? The draw is at 12 p.m. tomorrow and it will be on UEFA.com. I'm assuming it will also be on TNT Sports. They now hold all the rights to Celtic's European matches, so every Celtic League phase game will be on a TNT Sports channel of some sort over the next while. Again, they won't be on Celtic TV. It'll be audio only on Celtic TV. So yeah, the draw is 12 p.m. tomorrow on UEFA.com, on TNT Sports, I would imagine, and then we'll have live reaction to all of that on YouTube afterwards as well. Any final thoughts, Ryan, before we head off?
Just hoping for a busy day of transfers, to be honest. Let's get not the feel good factor. I don't even think that's the right word, because there's no feel good factor surrounding the club at the moment. But I just want to see some news, some positive news that can lift the place just ever so slightly but the focus has got to be on the end of the transfer window and that Glasgow derby against Rangers at the end of the week. Got to be the full focus. We'll take on the Europa League and whoever we draw when we get to that point. But right now, it's all about strengthening the squad ahead of a massive game at the weekend and beyond.
Okay, everyone, we will be signing off there. As I say, back tomorrow. We've got lots of stuff coming up on the website. We've got a look at the youth team, Josh's weekly look at the youth team coming up shortly. We'll have a look at Celtic's chance creation and what's going wrong there. We have in-depth looks at Balikwisha and some expert opinion coming up on that as well. So lots coming up on the website. We'll be back tomorrow. As I say, a bit later tomorrow, everyone. After the draw, there is no 10 a.m. show, so join us around 1 o'clock, I think, by the time we get our act together after the draw and get all our information together, and we'll see you again then. And hopefully Celtic get a pretty good draw in the Europa League, and we can all talk about the challenges ahead with the lay of the land known. Ryan, thanks for joining me today. Thanks for joining us in live chat. Let us know what you think about Celtic and Europa League in the comments below, and we'll see you again next time on The Celtic Way.